So, if you've watched any episodes of Locked on LSU so far this football season, you know my stance on Matt House. Really, I'm sure that you share that stance if you've watched any of LSU football this season. What did Brian Kelly say when asked about Matt House's job future, and why is now a critical moment to make those moves?
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome into Locked on LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. I am Caroline Fenton, and I am your host. You can follow me on Twitter at Caroline Fenton1. Let's get into it. Today's edition of Locked on LSU is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. We talked about it a lot here on this podcast. You and I, we've had these fun little conversations about the LSU defense and how truly awful and atrocious it really is. That continued to rear its ugly head against Texas A&M on Saturday, and we went through it in the recap pod, which of course you can find on your preferred podcast platform and on YouTube. I mean, Texas A&M at one point was 9 for 9 on third down. Texas A&M had a 9-minute drive with 17 plays where they converted 4 third downs on that drive because your defense couldn't get off the field on 3rd and 12 and 2nd and 15 and 3rd and 11, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. It was a 3rd and long, you name it, the LSU defense was going to be giving it up. And that was not something that was exclusive to the Texas A&M game. We know that. We've seen this all season long. I have been calling for, you probably have been calling for, a majority of the LSU fan base has been calling for Matt House's job. Now, look, I'm not a monster. I get it. I understand how cruel it might sound to say that you want somebody to be fired when they have a family and children, and when the rest of the defensive staff also has family and children. I understand that it's a sensitive subject and it doesn't sound very nice to say. I get it. But also, you have a job to do. There's a former NFL general manager that used to work at the radio station that I work for. And, and a longtime NFL general manager. And he said, you get 3 different things when you work in football, and it applies to jobs in general in life. This is not exclusive to coaching. But he said, if you excel at your job, you get extended at your job. Look at Nick Saban, who consistently receives job extensions. Look at Josh Heupel, who received a job extension after he got Tennessee to the number 1 offense in the country, number 1 team in the country for a week before they lost to Georgia. You excel at your job, you get extended at your job. If you do your job, you get to keep your job. Doesn't mean you get extended, but hey, you're doing your job. You get to keep your job. If you don't do your job, you lose your job. That is as simple as it is. We talk about it a lot in football because this is a results-based business. Your job, my job, it might be a little bit different because we don't have a scoreboard. Because the statistics of our job performance are not recorded every single day or every single week like they might be with an LSU defense or in football in general. But it's a results-based business. And if you don't get the results that were expected, if your results are not adequate or sufficient, then you do not get to keep your job. We've all seen it. We all know it. But let's do a deep dive, shall we, of just how insufficient Matt House has been at his job. Well, your defense cost you 700 yards and 52 points at Ole Miss. If the defense could simply just get 1 stop, we could be talking about a 10-2 season. 507 yards and 42 points at Alabama. Now, of course, the game got away from them late in the game when Jaden Daniels was out, when it was kind of a garbage time touchdown later in the game. But the game was tied at halftime. If the defense could maybe get a couple of stops. Maybe stop Jalen Milroe on at least one of his 4 trips into the end zone, or a handful of his 155 rushing yards. If that LSU defense could stop Jalen Milroe at his legs, maybe we're talking about back-to-back seasons where you beat Alabama. I mean, how different does that game look if you could stop the run? Maybe it doesn't look different at all. Maybe Jalen Milroe just carves you up in the passing game. I don't know. We can play that game all day long. But it's a fair question to ask. How different do those 2 games look like if the defense was just a smidge better? If the defense was just average and not horrendous? Cost you 21 points. 21 points in the second half alone against Florida State. Let's not forget. We can go back all the way to week 1. You were leading 17-14 at the half. You were the better team for the first half, if not for the better bit of 3 quarters. The game got away from you in the 4th quarter. The defense couldn't get a stop. 5 straight scores from Florida State in that second half. You allowed Florida State to convert on 9 of their 14 third downs. Arkansas had to fire their offensive coordinator in the middle of the season. You gave up 426 total yards and 31 points against a team that fired their offensive coordinator and could only muster up 3 points at home against Mississippi State. Arkansas. Yeah, it came down to a walk-off field goal to beat that team. You let them convert on 8 of 13 of their third downs. Missouri, 527 total yards. Now, that's a good team. That's a good offense now. But 527 yards and 39 points. And the fact that that wasn't even the most that you've given up this season. I mean, you gave up 411 passing yards to Brady Cook, over 100 rushing yards to Corey Raymond. I mean, you were saved by a pick 6 late in that game. It is crazy how different the perspective of this season could look had the defense just been a little bit better. 101st ranked team in total defense, giving up 6 yards per play, over 400 yards per game. They're the 89th ranked pass defense, giving up nearly 6 yards per carry and 164 rushing yards a game. You're the 104th ranked pass defense in all of college football, giving up almost 8 yards per attempt, giving up 245 passing yards per game. You are one of the worst defenses in college football. That's not LSU. You have 2 of the best, if not 3 of the best defensive players in the country. One of those is Harold Perkins, but it was Matt House's decision to take Harold Perkins off the field on third downs. It was Matt House's decision to move Harold Perkins into inside linebacker, effectively rendering him useless in that position. You saw how different the defense looked. I'll just use Saturday, for example, against Texas A&M, how different the defense looked when Harold Perkins was spying the quarterback on third down. I mean, crazy what happens when you put your best defensive play, you put your best players in the best positions where they're best utilized. Matt House couldn't do that. Where was Mason Smith this year? Why can't this LSU defense tackle? Like they got some dogs on defense. They got some dudes, and this defense sucks. Like this defense stinks. So when we talk about what my dear general manager friend would say, if you don't do your job, you do not get to keep your job. I would call all of those things not doing your job. So you do not get to keep your job. So what did Brian Kelly say about it? When asked about the future of the coaching staff changes that he might make, what did Brian Kelly have to say about it? We'll get into that coming up next after a couple of words from our sponsors here on Locked On LSU. All right, I want to tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the absolute most fun that I have had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season with a daily fantasy sport. So basketball season is here. You can now pick a combo projection across football and basketball from the Specials League. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you've got LeBron James and Travis Kelce at a 10.5-point combo of 3 points made and receptions. Or you can choose any other player in either football or basketball or both and just choose higher or lower. It is so much fun. Plus, PrizePicks offers a reboot policy. So what that means is that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So for reference, for football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. I absolutely love it. It is a blast. So go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that is prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. And the Locked On Network has some very exciting things cooking because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Rolling along here on Locked On LSU. We know it feels like coaching changes are inevitable, right? It feels like it has to be because the defense was just that bad. I mean, I said after the 2020 season, I said that might just be the worst LSU defense I have ever and will ever see. Now, I should have knocked on some wood there because that Bo Pelini defense was probably better than this defense that we've seen this year. And that Bo Pelini defense in 2020 didn't played a full SEC schedule. Remember the COVID schedule, you played 10 SEC games. That defense didn't have a Georgia State or a Grambling to kind of help you out, to give you a little bit an easier of a day some weeks. So keep that in mind. But Bo Pelini did his job so poorly, he lost his job. He didn't get to do his job anymore. That's the same thing. The same logic should apply with Matt House. It was the same thing with Brian Polian last year, special teams coordinator. Man, I complained, and you probably did too, complained about the special teams, rightfully so, because it seemed like any possible special teams blunder that a team could commit, that LSU team did at least once, if not twice in the season, if not multiple times in the game. If it wasn't muffed punts, it was muffed kickoffs, it was blocked field goals, it was missed field goal that was then picked up and ran in 100 yards for a touchdown against Georgia in the SEC championship game, blocks in the back that brought back big-time returns, like just stupid stuff. So Brian Polian did not coordinate the special teams very well. So Brian Polian was removed from his special teams duties. That's how it works around here. You don't do your job well, you don't get to keep your job. So what did Brian Kelly say about it when asked about the future of the coaching staff, if there would be coaching staff changes to be made? This was Brian Kelly in his press conference after the Texas A&M game on Saturday.
What are you going to consider, and how are you going to approach any staff decisions when it comes to your assistants and who may be with you next season?
Yeah, I mean, look, every year there's going to be an evaluation. I mean, I evaluate what I've done, and I have to look at, as the leader of this program, how did I lead this year? So it starts with me, and then I'll evaluate all of our coaches and our support staff as well. Everybody is part of this evaluation process. Our players will be evaluated this week, and then I'll go through a lengthy evaluation process of our entire staff, not just the coaches, but the entire support staff as well. the ultimate goal here is to win championships. But I also know that the development of this program is still ongoing, and that's an important piece in this evaluation process as well.
So let's talk about that. I know a lot of LSU fans were frustrated, angry with that response because you wanted Brian Kelly to maybe lead on a little bit more, that there would be changes made. I get it. I want changes made too. But let me play devil's advocate here. What did you expect Brian Kelly to say? And I don't like saying that, because whenever people say that, I'm like, well, I don't know what I expect him to say. Like, that's not my job to try and decide what he's supposed to say. Brian Kelly, I think, did the right PR thing, so to speak. I mean, let's be honest, guys. We know that coaches and ADs, coordinators at the NFL level, owners and GMs, they get up at a press conference and maybe they don't tell the total 100% truth. They're not going to bear, their entire soul of how they're feeling or exactly what the conversations are going on behind the scenes, because what does that really accomplish? Sometimes you got to get out there, answer the question. When Brian Kelly had to have known that question was coming, get out there, answer the question, and try to stir the pot as little as possible. We know Brian Kelly doesn't give you a whole lot of meat on any sort of proverbial press conference bones. So that quote, honestly, to me, does not make me think, like, just because I heard that, where he didn't really say, well, there's going to be changes that coming around here, it doesn't make me believe that there aren't changes coming. Brian Kelly says, hey, we have to evaluate our coaches. I have to believe he's been doing that, because isn't that kind of his job as the head coach? You're evaluating your roster and you're evaluating your coaching staff constantly, every day, every practice, every game, every single year. So Brian Kelly has done his evaluation. And if you would like to do his evaluation even further, I can highlight all of those numbers that I just shared with you of just how bad this LSU defense was. I am not going to get angry with a soundbite, because I do genuinely believe in my heart of hearts that Brian Kelly is a smart enough coach. Look, you can disagree with me on that. You can disagree with decisions that Brian Kelly has made in the past, or tactician decisions, coaching decisions, whatever it might be. I believe that Brian Kelly is a smart enough coach to know when a change needs to be made, to know when coaches need to be held accountable. And there absolutely needs to be some accountability in Matt House's future, because this season defensively, it's inexcusable. This defense cost this team a potential national championship. It did. And look at the comparisons between Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Look at the numbers and the comparisons between Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels, this offense as a whole, the postseason awards that all of those players and even Mike Denbrock is up for the Art Briles Award. I mean, it very much so compares to the 2019 season. Look at the games that LSU was just very close to winning had the defense just been a little bit better. This team could have been a playoff contender, and that defense took that away from them. If Jaden Daniels does not win the Heisman, I tend to believe that it will be because that defense couldn't get enough stops in those 3 games that LSU lost. I truly believe that in my heart of hearts. That deserves accountability. Now, I don't know when that is going to come. And that is the problem. Because the longer we wait, the more and more I'm thinking, okay, Brian's going to make a change. When's it going to happen? The transfer portal opens on Monday. We've already seen a bunch of players across college football. We talked about some of it yesterday with Brian Smith. Players that have already pledged their intent to enter the transfer portal. They're looking around. Let's not be naive here. There's active recruiting that is going on now that has been going on all season long. It's called tampering. Everybody does it. It doesn't make it right, but everyone does it. There is active recruiting that is going on. And those changes do need to be made. That those players that are looking for their next landing spot would like to know who their next coach is going to be. You're not going to commit somewhere when there might be a little bit of uncertainty. when there are still questions about who the next defensive coach or defensive coordinator is going to be. So the longer Brian Kelly waits, the more I think he's hurting the future of this team. Because you want your new coordinator to get in here, get acclimated, do evaluation, have meetings with players. So those players can then decide what they want to do in their future. If these players, let's say Mekhi Wingo, Mason Smith, if they don't agree with Matt House and his philosophy and whatever the message is from Matt House, it's obviously not clicking with this defense because that's the product they put out on the field. What's stopping Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo from saying, F it, I'm out of here. I'm going to the NFL. Nothing. So while I have enough faith in Brian Kelly to make the change that needs to be made, that it feels inevitable, I mean, clock's ticking, dude. Like, time is of the essence this time of year, not just with the transfer portal, but with the early signing period as well. With players that are either committed to LSU or committed elsewhere that you could maybe poach from other recruiting classes that would like to know who is going to be coaching them moving forward. They would like to know, hey, defense is pretty bad last year. Is there any hope that it could be better this upcoming year? We talked about it so many times, with Brian Smith here on the podcast, just you and I, about how a sense of stability is probably at the top of the list for recruits and transfer portal players, where some players in the transfer portal might say, hey, you know what, like where I'm at, it just feels a little shaky. It just feels like whether it's a losing program or a changing of coaches, I want to go somewhere that's stable. LSU is stable. The state of this defense, however, is not. So the change, I believe, is going to be made. And I'm going to be incredibly disappointed in Brian Kelly if he does not make that change. And if there is not a change, we're going to talk about that. But if you're going to make a change, you need to do it now. You need to do it ASAP. One thing that I do want to touch on coming up next is something that we talked about with Brian Smith yesterday. And that is a familiar face and a familiar name to LSU fans who could be potentially available on the open market as a free agent. Should LSU bring him back? We'll get into that coming up next after a couple of words from our sponsors. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's so important to have quality candidates to interview. You want to have a good pool of candidates to choose from. Plus, it is so important to find the right people for your business to end this 2023 year with a bang or to start 2024 on the right note. And LinkedIn is the best place to do that. But LinkedIn, it's not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. I mean, your hiring pool is going to be huge. And hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidates within 24 hours. I mean, LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and they might not have time or resources to hire. But thankfully with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, it is quick, and it is so easy. So you don't have to divulge a ton of resources and time and money to finding your next quality candidate. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, rolling along here on Locked On LSU, a little future of the defense. Matt House's job security, what Brian Kelly had to say about it. I'm not overly concerned about what Brian Kelly says in a press conference. I'm not, to be honest with you, or at least that soundbite in particular, a bit non-committal about the future of the coaching staff, because I don't think he wants to get up there and say, yeah, you know what, Matt House, he does stink, doesn't he? I'll probably fire him here in a couple of days. He's not going to do that. But as we're on the topic of defensive coaches, I'm sure this probably came across your desk just as it came across mine. A familiar name and a familiar face. Longtime LSU DBs coach, Corey Raymond, is now on the open market. So Corey Raymond left LSU and went with Billy Napier to Florida in the 2022 season. Corey Raymond has just been relieved of his duties by Billy Napier. The golden question of the week. Should LSU bring Corey Raymond back? I mean, LSU had some pretty spectacular defenses under Corey Raymond. LSU got the moniker of DBU partly and because of what Corey Raymond, I don't want to say built, because there was already a very storied history of defensive backs at LSU, but what he continued to build upon. The names and the defenses, the secondaries that LSU had as Corey Raymond was part of it, it was special. When we think about special LSU defenses in history, Corey Raymond was part of those. But a few things here, a few reasons why my answer to the question, should LSU bring Corey Raymond back, is no. Let's look at some of his defenses over the past couple of years, recent history. What have you done for me lately, league? In 2020, LSU had the 128th ranked pass defense in college football, giving up 323 yards per game. Oof, that defense was bad. That gives me shivers just thinking about it. 2021, LSU was the 80th ranked pass defense, giving up 237 yards per game. Not great. Not great. Like after that 2019 season, the defense just took a massive nosedive. At Florida, when Corey Raymond got there, 2022, Florida was the 87th ranked pass defense. 2023, this past year, the 81st ranked pass defense, giving up 226 yards per game. Just to put that into perspective, LSU was giving up 245. So Florida's defense, ranked better than LSU's, or secondary rather, the pass defense was ranked better than LSU's, but not by much. Not by much. And I know that Corey Raymond's not the defensive coordinator. That's Austin Armstrong at Florida, and that might be, a problem in and of itself. But still, it's not. Florida didn't have a very good secondary. So that's one thing. You need some massive overhaul of the secondary. You need somebody who has better production over the last 4 seasons, in my opinion. The other thing here that makes me lean no to not bring Corey Raymond back is something that we discussed with Brian Smith on yesterday's podcast. And you can find that on your preferred podcast platform and on YouTube on Locked on LSU. We talked about how coordinators want to bring their guys. Coaches want to bring their coaches. It's sometimes an awkward marriage whenever you have coaches in place and then you bring someone in to be their boss. They could have different philosophies, different ideations, different goals, different things that they look for in recruits, so on and so forth. That it's sometimes just the easiest fix is to clean house and let a new coordinator bring in their guys. So that's one thing, is if you bring in Corey Raymond, you would need to bring in a defensive coordinator that they would work well together. A good match, a good marriage. An arranged marriage, so to speak. And the only other thing with Corey Raymond, I will give him a ton of credit. I don't want this to come across as me, getting on to Corey Raymond, just spewing negative things about him. I think he's a really good coach and a really good person, a really good guy who did really good things for LSU. And he is a damn good recruiter. My goodness. High school kids love him. Families love him. High school coaches love him. I mean, there's a reason why some of the best defensive backs in the country want to play for Corey Raymond. We saw it at LSU. We're seeing it now with Florida's upcoming recruiting classes. Xavier Filsme, and I think I may have butchered that name, and if I did, I apologize. Genuinely, I apologize. 5-star defensive back, one of the top, excuse me, my goodness, one of the top safeties in the country in the 2024 class, committed to Florida. When Corey Raymond was relieved of his duties earlier this week, he tweeted out, man, you got to be kidding me. Like, those players love Corey Raymond. So I think that if LSU brings back Corey Raymond, it should be in a recruiting capacity and let I'm speaking it into existence, the new defensive coordinator bring in his coaches and his guys. And like Brian Smith said yesterday, Corey Raymond loves to recruit. that sometimes college coaches, that's the last thing they want to do. We saw Dan Mullen at Florida. That's ultimately what cost him his job at Florida. He just didn't want to recruit. Corey Raymond, that's not the case. He loves to recruit, and man, do recruits love him. And man, does LSU need some quality defensive back recruits coming into this program. So I would say in a coaching capacity, it may not be the best fit. In a recruiting capacity, I couldn't think of a better fit. Overall, I say no, unless it is in a true recruiting capacity. But fun defensive coaching day. Felt a little therapeutic, honestly, to get that out there. But on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU, we will continue to take a look at LSU, the transfer portal, and recruiting, some of the latest news. And we'll also take a deep dive into the newest transfer portal addition, what he can be for LSU's defensive line, what this defensive line looks like in the 2024 season. We'll get into that, plus so much more on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU. But stick around, because coming up next is Locked On Sports Today. That is the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel right here on the Locked On Sports Network. They cover the top stories every single day with local experts of Locked On. Our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, or just stick around because that's coming up next. And you can subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel.